Imagine this year's garden feeding you for years. The secret is tiny and powerful, but most people ignore it. Now in today's video, we shall look at 8 seeds that you could be sowing right now. Mrs. W is getting busy in the kitchen, and we shall have an entry-level introduction to seed saving. First thing we want to be sowing are some spring or salad onions. Now we multi-sow these. We aim for 6 to 8 seeds per cell, and they are transplanted out in a clump. We want to be sowing some radish. During the summer months, our favourite radish, French breakfast, it bolts. It's too hot, and it actually makes the radish really hot too, and I don't really quite want them that hot. So we're going to be sowing some now. This will be the last chance to do this. We're going to grow these in our containers, and then we shall put them up to the polytunnel when we change it over from summer planting to autumn planting. Last month we sowed some salad mixes. We sowed them into containers, and they're going to give us some amazing lettuces over the autumn period. They're simply cut and come again lettuces. I find those easier at this time of the year. But now we want to concentrate on those lettuces that will give us harvest from December and through on into the new year. So today we shall be sowing a variety called Winter Density and a variety called Arctic King. Mrs. W is sowing 2 seeds per cell. We shall thin to the strongest seedling, and then we shall plant them out, either into the greenhouse or the polytunnel, spaced at around 12 inches apart. These will give you harvests from December onwards. Back in August we sowed some spinach, and they've germinated really well, and we shall shortly be transplanting those out into the plots. They're going to be grown outdoors, and they should survive nicely, and we can have some nice pickings of spinach through the autumn months. But Mrs. W is going to make another sowing today, and these will overwinter in our polytunnel or greenhouse. They will give us small pickings later on this year, and then they'll take a break. And then as we get into the new year, particularly into February, as the weather warms slightly and the daylight length starts to increase, we shall get many harvests between then and June, when they're likely to want to rise to flower and bolt. The kale that we sowed back in June has done really well. Indeed, it's ready for us to begin harvesting, and kale is one of those superfoods. But what we want to do today is to sow some more kale that will go into our polytunnel, and that will grow away nicely and slowly over the autumn period, and it will be ready for some fresh pickings as we turn into the new year. As usual with brassicas, we look to sow 2 seeds per cell, and then we shall thin to the strongest seedling. In August we said you could be sowing some spring cabbages. And those spring cabbages are really to go out into outdoor plots. But myself and Mrs. W are not actually going to be growing any outside. Ours will be under cover. So now is the time to be sowing those spring cabbages. They'll have plenty of time to settle down and get themselves away. They'll take a break later on in the year and almost cease to grow. And then as we turn into the new year, round about February, March time, they will be ready to give us some harvests. Now you want to be setting these at about 12 inches apart, because doing it this way means that in March and April you can take every other one and chop it up and have it as some amazing spring greens, leaving the rest to go on and make a nice heart that will give you food during that very vulnerable time during May, known as the hungry gap. I've got to tell you folks that we actually sowed some coriander in August, but unfortunately none of it actually germinated. Now, it actually had the seed packet for some time, so my guess is that the seed is quite old and it just wasn't viable seed to germinate. So we went out and we bought some more, and Mrs. W here is sowing our coriander. She's simply broadcasting it in a container. We shall actually leave it there in that container. It won't grow in anything else. It'll just grow away here, and we shall take some nice fresh halves from it. Now, coriander really doesn't like the heat. If you ever have trouble with coriander bolting, it will usually be because it's really, really hot. So by sowing it now, the temperatures are starting to cool somewhat. You could leave it on your windowsill and just take it whenever you want it, or keep it in a nice cool place, for us like a polytunnel, where it won't get too hot. And then lastly, off camera, Mrs. W actually sowed us some lovely salad rocket, or as you know it, Frank, arugula. See, I do remember the things. I do read all the comments when you tell me what these things are. Last month we sowed wild rocket. This month we're sowing salad rocket, and that should be ready for you to cut and eat within about 35 days. Has a wonderful peppery taste, and by growing it in containers you can move it to wherever it needs to be, whether it needs a little bit more sunshine, whether it needs a bit more shade if the autumn is hot, or if you sow it in a smaller container you can simply leave it on your windowsill to grow away, and you can take your harvest as and when you need them. Anything where we're growing in containers, because some of ours are quite large containers and they do really quite well. You may remember that earlier this year we were gifted a little mini greenhouse, the Vivor mini greenhouse, and we shall actually be moving those into there once the weather starts to turn much colder and become much more inclement. Works really well for us because it's on our patio. We just need to step out of our patio doors into the greenhouse and pick that what we want. Myself and Mrs. W, we like to try and save our own seed wherever we can. Why should you bother saving your seed? Well, it saves you money for starters, and in some cases you may find that some of your favourite things to grow, a seed company is dropping. So to be able to save those seeds and continue them on into the future, it's a really good thing to do. But also, over a period of time, the seeds you save, the vegetables then that you grow, they adapt to the conditions of your vegetable plot. There are three terms that you will hear a lot of. That is heirloom varieties, also open pollinated varieties, and F1 hybrids. Now, heirloom varieties are varieties that have been grown over a number of years. This is a variety called Coeur de Boeuf, and it is an heirloom variety. You can see it produces some really huge tomatoes. This is Coeur de Boeuf and is also an heirloom variety. These beauties here are Moneymaker, and they are an open pollinated variety. With heritage varieties and open pollinated varieties, these are the ones that you want to save seed from. But this video is actually an entry-level seed saving guide, because although you can actually save your seed from heritage and open pollinated varieties, there are some other rules, and they are that if you're growing something of the same family, they can cross-pollinate. So for example, the melons that we're growing 2 or 3 different varieties. They can easily cross-pollinate. And there is a whole list of vegetables that can do that. But the ones that we're talking about today, you'll be absolutely fine with. These, on the other hand, these super sauce tomatoes that we're growing, They are an F1 hybrid. And with F1 hybrids, if you attempt to try and grow the same plant from the seeds, you just simply won't know which children you will get. Choose the healthiest and most typical plant in the row with no disease. Remember, you are selecting your future garden on purpose. Next, we shall look at how you can save your own tomato seeds. But as you can see here, we have many tomatoes that are ready to pick. So the first thing that we need to do between us is to get these tomatoes off these plants.
If you're anything like us, we have been harvesting so many vegetables and fruits from the garden this summer. Our freezers are chock-a-block full, and I've been looking into how I can preserve these tomatoes in a different way, not taking up the freezer space. So my grandmother used to water bath fruit in syrup, and I thought, well, perhaps we could do that with tomatoes. And having done a bit of research, you can water bath tomatoes. You just need to make sure that you add some lemon juice in with them when you do it. And so today I'm going to show you how I have been water bathing my tomato passata. And while I'm making this, this is when I like to save the seed from the tomatoes. These are all coeur de boeuf tomatoes, and this is the one that Barry was showing you on the camera a little while ago. It is nicely ripe, it's a good specimen, there's no blemishes on it, it's how it should be exactly. So I simply take a piece of kitchen paper, lay it onto a tray, and then slice this lovely tomato in half. And you can see there's some lovely seeds just there, ideal. All I do is just take them out, drop them onto the paper separately. I've just spread them quite evenly over the piece of kitchen paper. I'm just going to write the variety on here so that we remember, and then I shall be placing them on this tray on my kitchen windowsill for a couple of weeks. And if I can write on here without it all going funny, yeah, there we go, coeur de boeuf. And after a couple of weeks, you can simply, as long as they're all nice and dry, you can just simply fold that up, pop it into an envelope and store them somewhere cool and dark until next spring when you want to sow them for your new seedlings.
And we find this works really well for us, don't we? Because there is a fermenting method too.
There's a couple of different ways you can do it, but this is, to me, this is the easiest way for me. I quite enjoy doing it like this. So.
Yeah, and the red cherry tomatoes that you see here, they were actually seed that we saved using this method last season, and they performed very well.
So to make the passata, I have switched the oven on to 200 degrees centigrade, and that's warming up at the moment while I'm prepping the fruit. The fruit has been washed and dried, and I don't ever skin the tomatoes. I just simply cut it down there and take out that core bit and pop them into a baking tray, a large baking tray. So that lovely basket has produced two beautiful trays of chopped tomatoes, which I'm now going to pop into the oven, 200 degrees centigrade, for approximately an hour, possibly giving it a bit of a stir halfway through. You could at this point season them. I don't season them, I just do it as a pure tomato passata. You can always add seasoning later. The tomatoes have had an hour in the oven, and as you can see, there's quite a lot of water, liquid that's come out of the tomatoes. And so what I'm going to try to do now is to actually scoop out with a slotted spoon the soft tomatoes into a bowl. And so with just an ordinary stick blender, I'm just going to start to pulp this up. The before water bathing, I'm using some Kilner jars with a screw lid and rubber seal. I have washed the jars, popped them onto a tray in the oven to sterilise. They're on 100 degrees centigrade for about 20 minutes. While they're in the oven, I've now turned on my pan of water, which the jars are going to go into, and I've also got a little pan here coming up to the boil, which I shall pop the lids into just to sterilise before we use them when we decant the passata. The passata is all ready to be decanted into the jars. These have just come out of the oven, so these are very hot. The water bathing process you can do with tomatoes, as they are quite a high acid content fruit. But to make sure that they are properly, safely acidic enough to do this process, I add a tablespoon of bottled lemon juice into each one of these 300ml jars. But it's best to use the bottled lemon juice because it is a constant acidity in these bottles. Unlike a fresh lemon, you'd not always be quite sure how acid it is. And I'm aiming to leave about ½ an inch at the top of the jar space. Now, to make sure that the seal is perfectly clean and so that you get a very good seal on these lids, I'm just going to take a little bit of vinegar on a piece of clean kitchen paper and just run that around the top of each of the jars. Then if you had any spillage on there, that could possibly make the seal insecure. So now we'll just take the sterilised lids and lay them gently on top. Check that the lid is central to the top of the jar, and then the band that goes round, the screw band, you just pop that on and just finger tighten it. You don't need to screw it in really tightly or anything like that, just finger tight. Had this pan of water sitting on the hob while I've been doing this, gradually heating up. It isn't boiling, we don't want it to be boiling right at this moment in time. What I have done, because we live in a very hard water area here in East Anglia, I have added some vinegar into the water to help prevent the limescale that can, sort of the chalky limescale that can attach itself to the outside of your jars and look a bit unsightly. So I've just done that. And so, if you have a trivet, a metal trivet that you could put into the bottom of your saucepan, that would be good. I do not have one. But I'm going to use a folded old tea towel, and I'm going to pop that in to the water. Basically, you don't want the jars to touch the bottom of the pan. The jars are in the water with a good 1.5 inches of water above the top of the jars. They're fully submerged. And I'm now bringing this to the boil. When it boils, I shall just turn it down so it's a steady boil, and I shall time it for 25 minutes. Now this is for 300ml of passata. If you were using bigger jars, you would need to extend the time that you water bath them for. The jars have now had 25 minutes boiling, and I've just switched off the heat. They now need to just sit in the water for probably 15 minutes, just so that they start to cool down a little bit. So once they've cooled down, after about 15-20 minutes, I shall lift these out with my tongs onto a tea towel. It definitely needs to be onto a tea towel, just so that the glass doesn't shatter or anything like that, and so they cool down overnight. And then tomorrow you will take the bands off and check the seals. You probably hear the seals pop as they start to form their vacuum as you take them out. Out of the quantity of tomatoes that we roasted off, we have got 11 full jars, 300 gram jars of tomato passata. And I'm going to pass on a little tip so that you don't make the same mistake as Mrs. W did. As I hadn't sterilised enough jars, I placed some more into the oven to sterilise. When I took them out, they'd obviously got a little bit too hot, and I foolishly placed my tablespoon of lemon juice into the bottom of the hot jar, and it immediately cracked. This one. So what I would suggest you do is half fill the jar with the passata, then add your tablespoon of lemon juice, and then fill it up. That would be a good thing to do. Don't end up with more crap jars. And not wanting to waste anything, if I ever possibly can, the juice that came out of the tomatoes in the bottom of the tin, you can see how it's slightly separating already. I put this through a sieve just to get out any big pips and things like that. And I'm going to put that into this clean jar, and I shall store this in the fridge. It is a really lovely cool drink, really nice drink, and it's really good to add into stocks or soups, stews, things like that. It'll keep in the fridge for probably 3 to 4 days, but it's really nice. And obviously you can freeze it if you have any freezer space left.
Beans and peas are among the easiest seeds that you can actually save. You can see that we've left some of these runner beans on here. We're letting them go over until they become like this. These pods have gone brown as opposed to still being green like this one. Once they get to this stage, all you have to do when they're ready is to remove them from the pod and then lay them on a dish like we have with the borlotti. Now this bean here is a variety called White Lady. The bean I showed you a little while ago when we were talking about the seeds was a Lady Di.
These are runner beans, aren't they?
They're both runner beans. Clearly I've just harvested those, so they're very fresh seed. This Lady Di was one that we saved from last season. And you can see here that they've germinated and grown very, very well. We have good strong plants. They've covered the archway. We've had, well, beans
and tons
and beans and beans, which is really, really fantastic. So we have had years where the plants haven't done so well, but ever since we've been saving our own seed, the plants have been absolutely amazing. We've never not had a really, really good harvest. In the case of both the White Lady and the Lady Di, we've been saving these seeds now for must be 4 years, is it? Maybe even 5. I can't quite remember now. So like I say, over a period of time, these plants, they adapt to your veg plot. Also, I happen to be looking at one of the catalogues that was sent through to us the other day, and for 25 of either of these seeds, £3.95 just for 25 seeds. You don't need many pods to get 25 seeds. So that's a really, really good reason, because it does help your wallet when it comes to saving seed. Now, with peas and beans, all you really need to do is to, as I say, put them on a plate, let them dry out in an airy space for probably 7 to 10 days. And you'll always know when they're ready, because you can try to snap them, and if they won't snap, that means that they are fully dried. I'm not going to do it with this one because I've only just harvested that and I want those seeds. And then short term you can leave them in an envelope, that's fine, but actually what we've found over the years is that the best thing to do is to put them into an airtight container, lid on. And then you just need to remember these 3 words: dry, cool, dark. That's the conditions that those jars or envelopes need to be stored in. So that they're dry, they're in a cool place, but also in a dark place. Something else that you can actually save from seed are some of your most favourite flowers. By saving your fresh seed, of course, it is going to be fresh. And if it's stored in the right way, you'll be able to use it the following season with all confidence. Once the seed gets a little bit older, what you might want to do is to see what the viability of the seed is. And a good way to do that is to count out 10 seeds, put them onto a wet paper towel, and then leave them for a few days and see how many germinate. For example, if 8 of them germinated out of 10, then you have an 80% germination rate. So if you want 10 plants, you may need to sow 2 or 3 seeds more. We saved some runner bean seeds probably 3 years ago, and they were used again this year. So I would say every couple of years, look to save a fresh batch of seed. And in that way, you'll be on the right side of germination and not on the poor side. Now, in today's video, we looked at some seeds that you could be sowing now. We also went through some entry-level seed sowing ideas. And you've seen Mrs. W do some amazing water bathing with our tomatoes that will keep those shelf stable for a period of 1 year. We look to make enough so that we have enough for 1 year, and we can continue to enjoy that amazing tomato taste for the next 12 months when we actually can't get to pick lovely fresh tomatoes. Do let us know in the comments, what seeds do you save? Do bear in mind that this was an entry-level video. I know that there are many more seeds that could be saved, and it's something that we shall turn our attention to at a later date. But actually, by saving just these few seeds we've talked about today, you can save yourself pounds and pounds. Seed is not cheap these days, and you don't get very many now for the seeds that you buy. So the more seed that you can save, more money that you'll take off your bill, and then you only need to buy the seeds that you actually can't save in your garden. I'd just like to say you've left some amazing comments regarding my daughter's wedding. That's going to be very soon now. We're into the second week of September, and yeah, I know that it's going to be absolutely amazing. It's going to be a joyful occasion. So thank you very much for all of your well wishes. Equally too, I'm absolutely blown away by the hundreds, yes, the hundreds that have actually signed up to our newsletter. It was something that we thought we could do for our viewers, and we thought one or two of you might be really interested in it. But the amount of people that have signed up for it has just been absolutely mind-blowing for myself and Mrs. W. If you haven't yet signed up to it, then the link is in the description, and I'll also leave it once again in the pinned comment in the comments section. All you need to do is click on that, subscribe to the newsletter, and you shall get that newsletter sent to you every month, free of charge. Now, of course, whatever we grow, your soil needs to be in the best health possible. And with us being New Dig, that goes a very, very long way to ensure that we have healthy soil. Remember, healthy soil means healthy plants that give bigger harvests. No spade required. But these days we also incorporate green manures into this, where our beds are free. And if you want to know more about that, then watch this video next.